NIMBY, not in my backyard? Yes, this is what we're going to be talking about and more with our good friend, broker owner Roland Kim, all the way from Vancouver, right after this. Yes, my friends, here we are. As promised, it's our favorite realtor, broker owner, all the way from the West Coast, the best coast, as we like to say. Roland Kim, how are you, my man?
Awesome, Gary. How are you this week?
We are doing pretty good. We got some sunshine here finally in Ontario, so we're catching up to weather-wise. Anyways, all sorts of good things happening right across Canada with real estate. And I know this is interesting. We were just kind of sharing off air, Roland. You were at a great event yesterday where you got to hear the new Minister of Housing in BC, and then I was reading up on some stats, and I thought this was interesting. I thought our listeners, our viewers would maybe find this somewhat intriguing. And we always talk about, is Canada over leveraged? Are we borrowing too much money? In a sense, maybe some are, but I think the big picture is, Roland, we now know, and the stats tell us from Stats Canada, 44% of Canadians do not have a mortgage. Let me rephrase that.
Incredible.
Yeah. 44% of homeowners do not have a mortgage.
Yeah.
Because someone's going to call us out on that detail, right?
Yeah, it's incredible when you think about it, right? That's almost half the people don't have a mortgage on all those properties that you see out there.
Exactly. And don't be surprised if you're in if you're in the market in Vancouver or in Toronto, where both Roland and I are, that could be you. Obviously, that could be your neighbor. Just because we're in, two of the higher markets or two of the highest markets in Canada, I know many people, I'm sure you do, Roland, too, that don't have a mortgage or very, very close to getting that mortgage paid off. Would you agree?
Yeah, I mean, the stats actually even higher in Vancouver. We're over 50% no mortgages is what I read recently.
Excellent.
Yep.
Excellent. Yep. Yeah. And the other interesting tidbit from that article I was reading, and I can put the link to the article in the show notes if someone wants to read it, is of all the mortgages that are in Canada, 71% of mortgage holders are on a fixed rate, which means obviously 29% are on a variable rate. And the comment in the article was along the lines of, well, if they're on a fixed rate, maybe at this moment in time, they're still coming to grips with what new interest rates are. So meaning if they went and sold their home today and bought something else, their interest rate may double. So from a short-term pain, that might feel like a lot of pain, right, Roland? Long-term, though, you had a really good way of looking at this long-term.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely that statement there is having an impact, I would imagine, on the shortage of inventory in the market, because there's probably a whole bunch of people that are homeowners that aren't in their final home and thought they were going to upsize, right? And we got kind of really, really comfortable with cheap money. And 75% of mortgages, locked in on that low interest rates, and now are looking that should they upsize in house, the rates would double for them. And so that's got to be intimidating and daunting, and I think is causing a lot of people so far to not get involved in upsizing and not adding more inventory and listings back into the market. But interestingly enough, like, unless you have a house that you can live the balance of your life in until you downsize, if you're still considering upsizing because you're not in your final home, I asked the question of, what are you waiting for? Because are you expecting that prices are going to stop going up or actually going to come down? Or are you expecting interest rates to come back to where you were? Because even if interest rates somehow come down 1-2% over the next 5 years, which could happen, but I don't see much lower rates for a while here. Then you're losing much more on the appreciation value of the home, and so it's interesting because it's definitely, I almost feel like people are sitting back and, so to speak, licking their wounds, waiting for the market to change, versus asking themselves, if the market doesn't change, how can I maneuver in it, and do I want to maneuver in it? Because I did at that event yesterday have an interesting conversation with a really successful realtor, and owns a beautiful townhouse, large townhouse, only has one child. And, that townhouse is large enough for him and his family. But they always thought they were going to, buy a house. And so his purchase would be in the 3 million mark. His townhouse is, it's nice townhouse. It's around 2 million. So it would mean that he's moving from a 1 million mortgage to a $2 million mortgage. And so although he knows that investment long term would be, better for his retirement and he can afford it, they are asking themselves if they want to do that. Right. And so definitely, I think you have a great point that there's lots of people out there that were planning on upsizing that may not, because they decide, they're in their 40s and 50s and they don't want to double their mortgage at higher prices. So it's definitely an interesting kind of pause in the market, I think, where people have to get comfortable with the new reality.
Yeah, and you raise a good point too. And you and I, we've talked many times about, why do we invest in real estate, and with the valuation of real estate, and that realtor knew that the bigger property, the more expensive property in a sense, was better long term for his retirement. And as we peel the onion away, it's easy as this, my friends. 5% on $1 million, we know what that is. 5% on $2 million is double. So to think of it that way, your retirement fund, if that's your retirement fund, has a greater opportunity, to double versus the $1 million property in that scenario, right? Does that, do you kind of coach your clients the same way in a sense?
Yeah, and then it's that fine balance of figuring out kind of your personal avatar, like your risk threshold, your comfort level. I remember when the rates started going up last year, I could really see which of my clients, even though financially they had the money to cover all the growth, were really the type of people that don't fall asleep at night over this kind of stuff, and they were calling me all the time. And wondering if they had made a mistake when they were upsizing from a townhouse to a house. So you got to be honest with yourself, because everyone has a different comfort level and different strategy. If things did get worse and your financial situation kind of folded in on itself, how do you maneuver through that? And so, not for everyone, I think, is leveling up in your house automatically the right thing to do for retirement. But it's one of the few things that has no capital gains, and you're putting down 20% and getting the growth of 5 times that. So it's compound interest at its greatest. It's just not viewed that way.
Yeah, exactly. And trust me, my friends, Roland and I aren't naive. We know that everyone, every family, every home has a different story, different perspective on this, and we're not naive to the fact that there are people that are struggling today, but that's why you align with yourself with a great realtor like Roland, so he can help navigate what that future looks like for you. Okay, so yesterday you had the opportunity to go to a really interesting event. Tell us about that.
Yeah, we got to go to the Vancouver Tennis Club and listen to the Minister of Housing for BC, and spoke to a room full of many investors, many realtors, business owners. And so it was interesting because I'd never actually listened to that minister before. It's a new ministry since the new government took over, and we've never had it before. So the good part is it's putting a lot of focus on housing and solving it, right? And it's kind of like, how did we get here? Well, we had Expo 86 and it was extremely successful. And then we never built quick enough for 25 years. And we got so far behind that everyone's unhappy. Tenants are unhappy, landlords are unhappy, builders are unhappy, and so it's a real place to start working from. And the gentleman was very impressive in like his navigation and not and how he was addressing the direct questions. And so it was interesting because he certainly wasn't sharing concrete concepts or things, but more items that they're working on that will be coming out. And so there's a lot of interesting things that he said. One statement that got me was 90% of the decisions on housing is done by local municipality. It refers to local municipality rules. And 90% of the problem and the noise and the challenges right now in housing go up to the province level. So the person we usually complain to has currently very little control in getting housing started on a local level. And so a few things relate to that. One is most cities have a city plan that they've created over the years, and they update where it clearly outlines the different density neighborhoods, the different types of housing in different areas, and it's been debated and approved. And so currently in many municipalities in BC, when a new project comes to the table, it appears that fits completely within the boundaries of that city plan, an approved city plan that's been vetted and it's been debated and it's been approved. The project or gets debated again. And so that I feel, although he didn't say it in those words, I feel like change will be coming down the pipeline where it'll be much easier to get projects approved that fit perfectly within a city plan. I think that it sounds like the province will be, coming forward with focusing on a number of different municipalities and say, here's the growth plan that you need to reach as a municipality. And I think they'll have mechanisms in place if that municipality has a NIMBYism mindset and doesn't want to get on board, because I feel that that's certainly been a concept that's been spoken of my entire real estate career, where everyone wants to, fix the problem and bring in infrastructure, but not if it changes my neighborhood, because, that's not cool. So, there's lots of things on the pipeline for that. We have a BC residential tenancy branch. So that's the body that helps, navigate the landscape between tenants and landlords. And majority of landlords are great, majority of tenants are great, but that 5 to 10% on both sides that that cause the problems kind of clog up the system. And so it was promising to hear that they're leveling up a lot of staffing in that department. And the concept, kind of right now, if a tenant stops paying you rent, you file, a process, and it takes like 3, 4, sometimes 10 months, I've heard, for that to get reviewed, and it always gets approved unless there's other circumstances because the rent's not being paid. And so, it was like a lot of common sense that seems to be coming forward from this ministry now, where it's the department at the tenancy branch has been directed to pull those cases, and if it's a simple non-paying tenant, then deal with it right away. So instead of a 4-month average to get the process moving forward for eviction, if payments not being made, we could actually see that happening in weeks or less than a month.
Wow.
And yeah, and like it sounds like they're hiring staff that will like get involved. So for example, if you have a landlord that's got a broken fridge and they haven't fixed it in a long time and a tenant complains, it's not going to take 2-3 months to run the system. They'll send someone out there to go see the landlord and say, this is your requirement as a landlord, will you take care of it? And I think that those kind of common sense changes could really, clean up that part of the bureaucracy. So it's, you can't fix it overnight. He had lots of things that they're working on, and it's definitely time, because what we are noticing is some of the challenges have gotten to a point where people are leaving, like investors and builders are leaving. Actually, Chip Wilson from Lululemon was there, I think, just to make a statement, and left and got his statement in, which was quite profound. And it was, he's a huge supporter of BC and business and in Canada, and has done so much, but he's no longer building in Vancouver because he can't. He's now building affordable housing in Washington because the numbers work there and the bureaucracy works there. So when someone like his stature and passion leaves the city, it's got to make you understand that your partnership with private entities and the numbers now at play no longer work. And so I think cities like Vancouver and Toronto, I think they've gotten away a long time trying to partner with business to solve the housing problem.
Yeah.
And I don't think that the business can solve it anymore because the numbers don't make sense. I mean, we have a a cap rate currently of not a cap rate, but a freeze on rents for less than 2% a year. And we don't have fixed term leases. Landlords are literally losing money if they get in at today's prices and try and be landlords.
Yeah.
And so it's a system that's currently not working. But I think we might be at kind of the detour point where hopefully some change starts making an impact.
Well, you make a lot of interesting points, in fact, and just to kind of shed some light on it for our listeners, we're looking at doing some developments here in Ontario, and so site plan approval, that's what everyone wants, right? Take a piece of land, whether it's raw land or already buildings on it, and it literally will take us close to 2.5 to 3 years, 36 months of planning and going through the process just to get it to site plan approval ready.
Hmm.
And on the flip side, we've been looking at an opportunity in Dallas, and it's literally, I don't want to say months, but it's literally in the months. We're not counting years, we're counting months to that same process. You talked about the bureaucracy and how it slows the whole thing down. You have many willing developers here in Toronto, and I'm sure in Vancouver, that want to build, but their hands are tied. And that obviously has a lot with the NIMBYism and everything else. And every just think about this. I've always kind of chuckled at this. I live in a town of about 50,000 people. We're a suburb of Toronto, so within, I can jump on the train and get downtown pretty quickly. 30 years ago, when my family moved here, there was a big uproar of like the few hundred homes that were built. Again, not in my backyard, right?
Hmm.
Yet those people that now live here are saying the same thing. I don't want all this building to come. Well, what about the home that you currently live in? Somebody had to put up some aggregation around that and so forth, right? Like we need to all be on board with allowing new builds to happen, highest and best use. Wouldn't you agree?
Totally. And it was interesting because it's interesting how bureaucracy can stamp out opportunities. So some of the things that he brought up was, I think he lives in Delta, in South Delta, and so one time was taking the SkyTrain in with a friend from Singapore. He was saying to go to a Whitecaps game, and on the way out, the gentleman he was with, his friend said, probably like 6 minutes, 7 minutes out at one of the stations, "Hey, let's get off here. I want to take a look." And he wasn't quite sure what was happening. He wasn't in the government at that time. But the gentleman from Singapore was so amazed that, like, why are there detached houses all around the SkyTrain station? And it was an interesting concept because it's like that's infrastructure that the province and the federal government has paid for, and yet we aren't utilizing the capacity of it, right, to actually build properly where the infrastructure exists. And even the concept of we put more energy into housing our cars than our people. Like, most of our projects are overbuilt for cars now, and the rules around certain parking requirements are a big roadblock in getting things approved. Even so, he was telling a story about a seniors residence for where they were going to bring in 80 plus affordable senior residents into a neighborhood in the city. The municipality there changed the rules that they wanted twice as much parking, and so it made the project unviable when literally the seniors had no cars. And in fact, the seniors were even saying, like, let's get rid of parking, but let's have plug-ins in the parkade so we can park all our scooters because we can't bring them upstairs. And so it was interesting where we definitely have a mindset of like, cutting off our nose to spite our face, and then being surprised when, we haven't made any real progress.
Yeah.
Um, it is, it's baffled my entire career why, I now see how many things are involved and why housing is so complicated. But my entire career for the last 15 years, all I've ever heard until recently is, layers of government trying to control the demand, which is literally like trying to, put your hole in a breaching dam and trying to solve it that way versus being like, we got to build the dam thicker and bigger if it's going to stem the tide of water. And we literally have to build more, and not only to like stay at top of it, but to catch up. And
Yeah.
it will be interesting to see if we're actually going to do it in the next 5 to 10 years, or if this is like an ongoing conversation in perpetuity.
Yeah, it's interesting. I love that. It's sometimes it takes that outsider's perspective, right, to kind of
Yeah.
make that light bulb go off. And I remember years ago, I was in an investment group, and one of the things that they taught was people are willing to walk up to 800 meters to get to public transportation. So what
Okay.
that means is, if you're looking as an investor, if there's a train station, or of a train station, or a hub going in, people will walk up to 800 meters to get to that train station or transport hub. And we own some homes that are within walking distance to different train stations and so forth. But yeah, you're right. As a single family home subdivision in that area, that has a bigger and better higher use from that perspective. Absolutely. That's cool. Very, very cool. Roland, okay. How do people get a hold of you?
Find me online, Roland Kim, KYM, and you can always reach me, Roland at RolandKim.com.
Excellent, my friend. So for Roland, I'm Gary McGowan. We'll see everybody on our next video. Goodbye for now.